So before we get to public comment, I just want to take a quick second to kind of introduce it for anybody who's here who doesn't really know what the process has been. It was probably about a year and a half ago, we started working on the town's comprehensive plan, and out of that, some of the recommendations involved redoing the zoning ordinance. The existing zoning ordinance, the town has found it difficult to administer. They weren't happy with it, and so we were contracted for an additional project to help conduct a new zoning ordinance process. We have gone away from the previous one, which is more of a form-based code, design-oriented, to more of a standard zoning ordinance. So you have, the terminology is different, there's different districts, the map looks a little different. And so, but we think that this will be more useful to the town in terms of administering it, and in terms of if people want to come here to do a project, we think it'll be easier for people on that side of the process as well. And so we've been working on it. I believe we started the zoning ordinance process in August, so it's been about 8 months or so that this committee has been meeting to have discussions on it. So at this point in the proceedings, we would do public comment on it. Once the public comment is finished, we will do your regular meeting, which is when the board would have the opportunity for a comment on it from the board position as well. So unless there's any specific questions, I think we can open it for the public for their comments.
Are there any questions from the public? No questions from the public. This meeting is now in order. I will read the FOIA statement. In compliance with the Freedom of Information Act, notice of this meeting was submitted by fax to Spartanburg Herald Journal, posted on the bulletin board in the lobby of Town Hall and on the town's website. Roll call.
Ms. Lemons? Present. Mr. Kennedy? Ms. Eastler? Present. Ms. Hardy?
Present.
Ms. Pennell? Present. Ms. Burr? Present. Mr. Mitchell?
Present.
The minutes from February 17, 2025 were distributed. Are there any corrections? If not, can we have a motion to approve these minutes? Minutes are approved. Discussions regarding...
There was a motion and a second.
Oh,
You didn't call.
second, I didn't vote. I didn't ask for a vote either. Second vote, all those in favor? Minutes are approved. Next on the agenda is the discussion regarding the zoning ordinance.
So we've had a great deal of discussion about the ordinance. Since the last meeting, we adjusted the map. If you recall, there was a question about a property that had been changed to multifamily. There's currently, I guess it's vacant. It was previously a doctor's office, and then a larger vacant piece behind it. At the previous meeting, both of those parcels were showing as multifamily. And now you can see on the map there, we've taken out the larger vacant piece at the back and brought that back to the R20 single family, and then the front part where the office building is still listed as multifamily residential on the map. That is the only change on the map. In terms of the document, we added the accessory dwelling unit definition. We added zoning administrator and zoning officer in there in the definitions section. We added language to the annexation section, which is page 3-5, section 3-7. We added the line that all annexations shall be required to appear before the Planning Commission prior to council approval. That was something that was brought up at the meeting last week, and we made that change. The only other change, I believe, is at the very end, where we added the planning commission language, which was previously in well, it's in your current ordinance, but we did not have that reflected in this ordinance. So the very last couple of pages are basically your planning commission enabling language. So that would be 5-6 through 5-8. And that is just an exact copy of the language that's in your current ordinance. So, I believe those are the only changes we've made since the last meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for me about the ordinance.
Jeff, I do have a question. So the neighborhood commercial district that we changed on Church Street.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the reasons we changed it from the central business unit to the neighborhood commercial was the discussion has been around being able to build a single family home there if something happens and there are existing property owners there.
Correct.
But when looking through the neighborhood commercial district, the only thing is residential uses in accordance with the RMF district guidelines, and I don't see anywhere that permits the single family.
So that language is basically what you would do then. If somebody were looking to build a residence in that district, you would go to the multifamily residential section and use those standards. And so if you look at the allowed uses in that zoning district, single-family dwelling is one of the permitted uses in the multifamily residential zoning district. So it would be permitted according to those requirements. So that would include going to the lot specifications, which would require a 5,000 square foot lot for a single-family house. So that's how it's allowed in the commercial district. You just follow the residential standards. So whatever's allowed in multifamily residential could conceivably go on that property. So.
So that 50% or more of the patents is our allowance.
Right, they could go back and rebuild as a single-family house.
Okay, thank you. Another question I have, if anyone else wants to step in, language around the R10, R20, this is going to be, it's like consistent through different zoning districts as far as single family, I think. It's where we added the accessory dwelling unit
Okay.
language. So if you go to 310, I don't know which page it is.
Right, 3-10 is one of the pages, but that language is the same for all those districts, so.
So my question there is, the property owners of the property on which the accessory dwelling unit is located shall occupy at least one of the dwelling units. Does that need to be a must? Because didn't we talk about the property owner actually being on site so that we don't end up with two?
Right, and so it's shall versus may. May would be permissive, shall says you have to live there. So then when we do the zoning language, that's typically the two terms we use, shall versus may. Shall says they have to live there, because you don't want basically just you to be able to have a rental property, then add an additional rental unit on it. That's not what that's intended for. It's intended for you to have a house and then have an accessory dwelling unit. But maybe you're older, you're an empty nester, you don't need as much space that's in the big house, and maybe you want to move into a smaller space in there and have the kids move into the front house. So you can still live in the accessory dwelling unit, but you would have to live in one of them according to the way this is written. So shall is requirement, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more comments?
So we did we were on the steering committee, some of us. And when we did that, part of what the town wanted, 43% loved that small town feel of Paxton. I feel like with this ordinance, it's kind of pushing the growth rather than, like out there on 176, I would rather that not be commercial. personally. I know it was a private discussion about those areas, but I think personally I prefer that to be residential than industrial or manufacturing. I would rather have manufacturing and production removed from the ordinance. That's me personally, because of pollution issues, and I'd rather have people than manufacturing and production. I'm thinking maybe residential agricultural for that area, where people could have small farms. Because on the residential agricultural, it says they have to have 5 acres, according to the new ordinance. But if those were 5 acre, split into 5 acres or whatever, people could do that there where they can't do it anywhere else in the town. And my other concern is, and I already spoke about this at other meetings, our focus was supposed to be to reduce the ordinance and reduce the zones, but rather than doing that, we went from 9 to 15. And it's, I have the public survey here, and the very first page, it says zoning issues, too many districts confusing, too hard to do business. It says right there that that's what our focus should have been. So I still don't understand how we went from 9 to 15. We almost doubled zones.
Right. So I think the problem with your current ordinance is not necessarily the number of districts. I think it's the language in there. It's much more design-oriented, which I think it makes it harder for people to develop and figure out what they need to do under your current ordinance than what this ordinance. I think this is more clear in terms of if you want to do a business, you have to do A, B, and C, and I think it's much more clear than your current ordinance is. Adding additional districts makes it easier for the town to control development because you can go up in small gradations instead of, say, going from single family up to multifamily, which is going to allow a lot more. You have things like the residential duplex, which maybe you can do a little bit of density right over here, but it's still controlled. You're only allowing a little bit. And so I think it helps you control in steps how dense you want it to be. And a number of those districts are there as tools for your possible use. They're not reflected on the map currently. But if somebody wants to come in with a different type of project, you may think it's okay for the town. But now you have a tool to allow them to do that. And so that's why there's more districts. But I think overall, I think it's an easier to use document from Patrick's perspective in having to enforce it, as well as somebody, wants to come in and start a business. I think it's easier to do it under this ordinance than it is under your current one. So I think it does simplify it in a sense, even though it does seem like there's more districts. I still, again, it's up to you what you want in it. It's your ordinance.
Before it was pretty straightforward.
Well, that's not what the comments from the public said, was that they thought they had problems with that ordinance. And so, and that, they were having a difficult time. And that's what I heard from staff, that people were coming in, they were having a hard time. They thought starting businesses here because it was unclear. They had to do extra steps that they weren't sure they wanted to do. And that's why we sort of went this direction, again, because I think it's easier to enforce and it's easier for people to use.
For the commercial area, the neighborhood commercial.
Right.
General commercial.
And so, for example, again, like when we did the residential districts, we looked at what you have already, and we tried to make as many of those properties as possible conforming. And so that's the map where we looked at all the single family and we broke them out by lot size, because one of the things that we try to do is make sure to the largest degree possible, not 100%, you'll never have 100%, but that as much as possible, what's out there on the ground now is conforming with the new ordinance. And so that's why you have 2 multifamily districts, because if you just did R20, you're going to have a lot of properties that aren't going to meet those requirements. And
That's
so,
why I think in the R10, if it was R10, why couldn't it be R10?
we have R22 because you have areas that don't have sewer that are going to have, larger lot requirements, because to get through Department of Environmental Services now, it's not DHEC anymore, to get a septic permit, they are required to have larger lots. So again, we just sort of looked at what was on the ground already and drafted the two, you know. A lot of towns will have more single-family districts than that. You know, they'll have, you know, an R5, an R10, an R15, an R20, an R25. I mean, you don't need that, but I thought 2 was reasonable based on, again, the mix of current lot sizes that you have in town.
Because we're a community of approximately 2,200 people, we're not a large community.
Right. And that's why there's only 2 single-family, so.
Okay, so I have another question. All that on the map, that's Milliken, what is that considered? Because that's not zoned anything.
The green?
Yes.
So the green is the outdoor recreation district, and so that, we added that district to the ordinance. And so you see the river preserve out there, and then the, all the Milliken property there. So basically,
Which one is that? The one that says Pat on the legend?
Yes.
so that's a mistake on the legend, yes. That's the outdoor recreation, OR, outdoor recreation district. I'll make that change on there, and you'll see that. And so all this is back in the Milliken property, and of course, the river preserve. That property has a lot of slope issues, it's got to be hard to develop, or other pieces have floodplain issues, and so it really is limited in the ordinance to outdoor recreation type uses. We've gone through that district and what's involved in that, but it is very limited. One thing that we talked about before, that does include the Victor Park area. And so if that does redevelop someday as a subdivision, as a residential area, what you would do is you would cut that off and rezone it to either one of the residential districts or a flexible review, depending on what the appropriate thing is for what they're asking for.
I remember the steering committee, we went over that.
Yeah. And so it is zoned, I'll make that change on the map. I did not catch that, so. So it should say OR for outdoor recreation on the green.
Okay, I just don't want us to get away from the small town feel. I know it's a big push
Right.
for some reason for business. A lot of people on our survey, our public survey, 72 people, which was 52% wanted restaurants. We already have 7 restaurants in this little bitty town. Coffee shop was a big one. Ice cream, which we have a coffee shop. I just would like us to be able to focus going forward on the public survey instead of just making decisions not taking into consideration what the public has said. And there was only 138 people that participated, but it's still, it was important enough to them to feel inclined to do the survey. So I'm just worried about getting away from that small town feel. I'm fine with businesses and then, commercial area and then the transitional areas like we talked about. That was another thing. So over on 150 at Memorial Drive, you have that corner property that has 5 trees on it at this point. You have that as in orange as the transitional area. But then you have where the convenience store is not transitional, it's not on here, it's on here as residential. And then also where the old satellite depot is, that now there's a business going in there, is also not transitional. On this map, they're both the residential.
That should have been transitional on there.
But that one that hasn't been open for like 20 years, there was some kind of service station or something there at Jerusalem Road. Does anyone remember? At least 20 years that it's been empty. So that is on there as transitional, which I thought was funny because there's 5 trees on it right now.
But is there a commercial building on it?
Yes.
Right.
But it's owned by the person who lives in the house beside.
So we probably looked at it on the map and saw a commercial structure, and again, in trying to keep everything in conformance, that's probably why.
Convenience stores also, it's a commercial building.
And that's the corner of,
It's the 150 stores, what they call it.
It comes from one street.
So it's 150 in Turner Street?
Yeah, like it's a couple down from that.
Okay.
It's a sixth property from Turner Street.
And you're saying that should be transitional commercial?
I believe so. It's a
Okay.
convenience store. It's always been a gas station
Okay.
convenience store. As long as I know.
Yep, I've got that. Yeah, I will certainly look at those on the map and make that adjustment.
And just, as we're looking at the random transitional stuff, the one that's between Hart Street and, that's the doctor's office, right? We did do that one. Okay.
I just have a question. We went before about mobile homes. Where is the area that's for the mobile homes? Because I looked in the map and I couldn't find it.
There's none. And so right now, every mobile home in town will be considered grandfathered in, essentially, non-conforming. And so you have a district that will allow you to do it. And so we had the example where if somebody's mobile home burned down and you wanted to allow them to put a new one in, what the process would be is they would have to rezone that to that mobile home district. Because basically what you've said is you don't want just mobile homes everywhere. You don't want them as permitted uses in your standard residential districts. And so the way to handle that would then be to allow them to rezone it at some point in the future to that mobile home district, because the way that district is worded is for mobile home parks and mobile home lots. So it doesn't have to be just a park. It could be for an individual mobile home. But the sense that we've gotten through this is that this was the way to handle it, have them just be regular, single-family zoning for now, and then they would be non-conforming. If they moved off the lot, they could not be replaced unless they got a rezoning to that district, so.
Isn't there any way for grandfathering if somebody, because I just don't feel it's fair that if like somebody's house gets demolished, the fire, whatever it is, and then they have to come and get permission to put something in there, and they could easily be told no. And I just feel like it should be grandfathered in, that if somebody owns that land and has a house there, they should be able to put it.
Well, you have non-conforming language, which, again, it goes to damage, if it's 50% or more damage, then they would have to comply with the underlying zoning. So really your options are to allow mobile homes in your single-family districts, which would mean anywhere in yellow you could have mobile homes, or they would have to go through that rezoning process. There's not really a way to.
If we allowed it in the residential districts, would they have to meet the same land requirements that like a single family home would?
They would. So if it's R20, then they would have to meet the underlying zoning. When they put it back, it would have to be, whatever that minimum lot size was for that district, so.
Because I don't know.
It's just hard to say, you treat different kinds of non-conforming uses differently. And so, what's the difference between a non-conforming business and a non-conforming mobile home? You want to treat them all the same way, and so they have that, the rezoning avenue is the way to do that, where you have the opportunity. They could come today and get it rezoned if they wanted to. They won't have to wait. If they think that's going to be a long-term use of the property, they could come next month and request that it be zoned to that. Or if there's an issue down the line, they have that same opportunity to do that. So I think either you allow them everywhere in single family, or you do this process where they would have to get it rezoned, so.
The rezoning process would start at the planning commission, y'all make the recommendation to council, and then council would make that vote on that.
Right.
Well, I think the light yellow areas wouldn't be a problem aside from like a subdivision area. Because I'm sure there's people, even though it's not an HOA community, I'm sure they don't want mobile homes in there. But I don't see a reason to not allow it, because I drove down a small street the other day, there was 3 single-family homes and 11 mobile homes. So I think there's a lot more mobile homes in this community than people realize, because I didn't even realize, and I go down the street all the time. And I was like, oh, there's just the 2. Well, I went down the street and I was like, no, there's 6 here, and then there's So there's more, and then there's 2 multifamily on that stretch of road, so I don't think it's fair to the community to not allow them to replace their mobile homes.
But to do that, you end up setting it up so that anybody can bring any new mobile home or existing mobile home into the town of Pacolet. Right now, you've currently got it set up so that there are certain areas where they can and cannot.
Can we word it that it has to be new?
It just has to meet something that meets the building code. You can't really put a date on it other than it has to meet the building code. So, if that building code is, the language is 20 years old, then it could be brand new, it could be 20 years old.
Well, there's an awful lot of run-down, dilapidated, single-family homes, probably more than mobile homes in this community. So I'm fine with having mobile homes.
I agree. One of the things, that one was bothering me too. One of the things in our comprehensive plan, they took statistics on our housing. And in our housing, most popular was, of course, single-family detached homes. But mobile homes came up as our second listed housing. And if we thus far, it's built our community. And, obviously these are law-abiding citizens living here, or they wouldn't be in their homes. So I'm in agreement. I don't mind committing them in residential zones, but we would have to build for that.
I mean, could we change where Michael Estates is? Kim, where's that you live? Is
Right across the
that a
street.
named community?
Yeah, it's Ligon Acres. It was Ligon Acres.
But is there any way to make that the R10 or whatever, just switch it so mobile homes could not be put there?
Well, right now, everything in either color of yellow, you cannot have mobile homes. Well, basically,
I'm saying the lighter yellow should be allowed. The more densely populated areas?
So the lighter-
Of course not.
the lighter yellow is the larger lot, so the R20. The darker yellow is the more dense R10, so the 10,000 square foot
Well,
lots.
I think the
So-
R20, they should be allowed, but I think we need to do something to change Michael Estates and where she lives so that it matches with the Mill Hill and those more densely populated areas with the smaller parcels of property. And I don't know what we could do.
Ligon Estates.
I mean, I know the mobile home issue has come up
Talking
several
about-
times.
You said Michael Estates?
Michael Estates?
Yeah.
So that's
Right
this,
there.
where
It's down
Kalen
Pine Street.
Kalen Shea Avenue?
Okay.
Right there?
Yeah, but across the street, it was called Ligon Acres when it was developed.
Oh, where Elizabeth Street is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, if you're
So
on,
that's mobile homes there?
if you're on
Okay.
High Street, there's a house that sits right there, not on the corner, but kind of on the corner. That was Mr. Ligon's house, and so he developed all the stuff behind it, all of Elizabeth Street on both sides. And at the time, there wasn't codicil. If you wanted to build into that neighborhood, you had to meet the restrictions of, I think it was square footage and setbacks and all those rules. But it did have codicil, whatever you call it, saying
Restrictive covenants.
what kind of house you, I think
Yeah.
it's, yeah. And so,
Yeah, with the
so
cul-de-sac
did
right
Michael
there.
States at one time, but I think his went away and sold it, I think.
Sometimes they age out, there's time limits in some of them, and so,
I don't think the Ligon Acres have a time limit, it's just the logical, so.
But they were talking about Michael Estate, that's the one that's got the cul-de-sac right there, you see it?
okay.
Which I don't think a mobile home could be placed in any of that based off of setbacks and things, as this is, those are all existing homes, correct?
Right. Just maybe one or
And there
two.
might be deed restrictions as well, that they're not allowed to put them on there. Or if there's something someone can look into.
Well, I know if looking at states, they had, back in the day, they had FHA housing and, another kind of housing that's kind of comparable to Section 8. And you could not put a house, like that. in
Right.
subdivision.
Yeah, there may be deed restrictions on that stuff, and the same with Michael Estate, because that is a named subdivision. So probably, I bet that there are deep restrictions not allowing mobile homes to be in those areas anyway. So I don't feel like there's anything that we would have to do to change those things, if someone could look into it. But I mean, all these other areas that are not, you know, in densely populated areas or subdivision areas, I don't see a problem with it. Like I said, I heard down the street the other day, and it was like, what, there's more mobile homes than there were single family homes, stick-built homes.
I also think if they're spread out throughout the community, then we don't end up with a dense area of just rental properties and the owner does not maintain and available for the people there. You're going to have more families that are buying that property and putting it there as opposed to somebody that's just trying to run it up.
With mobile homes?
I think they're spread out and not in a dense area. We have
But
that
if you set it up so that they can locate anywhere in the residential districts, and they can be anywhere throughout the entire community.
Right, that's what I'm saying, I think that's more comparable with the kind of community that we have.
Than
As
the
opposed to having a big clump that end up being rented properties. We're encouraging family input. I think that the existing ones have typically families. And if it's already existing, why would we restrict it when it's proven to be good for our community?
And it's just restricting new mobile homes that come into the community. It doesn't restrict the existing.
Right.
But you don't get to say that we're only going to allow new mobile homes to come into the community. So you may end up having some 50 and 60 and 70-year-old and 80-year-old, mobile homes that end up coming into the community. A lot of mobile homes end up being absentee landlords that are wanting to drop all this stuff out here. I mean, you look at what it was on Norwood Street, the end between Norwood Street and Highland Street, that area was in terrible shape. And we were able to use code enforcement over time to be able to get rid of that area, but it was in really bad shape in terms of, everything was all kind of falling apart. If that's the kind of direction that y'all would like to see in the community, that's up to you, but.
Well, I guess, like, that was a more densely populated area, correct?
No, that was all single-family homes all around it.
And it was happening with the, like,
But it's mobile homes or?
Right off Sunny Acres there.
Yeah, off Sunny Acres.
Norwood?
Is it?
Talking about Norwood?
Well, that's, I think, what we were talking about, could then new mobile homes have to meet the same guidelines as a single-family home. We'd rather have single trailers than trailer parks.
That was a trailer park on Norwood.
Yeah.
My question is, what was the ordinance for the mobile homes in the old zoning ordinance? Is it a lot different than the one we have, than the one we're working on now?
What we had on there, the biggest, I guess, change, and if y'all want to go back to that, there was a mobile home district, and there was, I believe, Dogwood Circle was the mobile home district. The Teo Drive area was in the mobile home district. And then there was a couple spots, there were about 2 or 3, 4 homes that were on Graceland. There were some that were on Memorial Drive that were on there before. So, and I may be able to pull up that map to show you the areas that were mobile home areas.
In terms of the language in your ordinance, 4-42 is the manufactured housing standards. A lot of that came from your existing ordinance. And that's where it talks about having to be tied down, having to have a certain pitch on the roof, that kind of language. That is very similar to what was in your previous ordinance. Most of that came over.
Is it possible though that they have to meet the same lot requirement as a single-family home?
So right now, if you allowed them in the R20, you just said manufactured house is a permitted use in the R20, they would have to meet all the lot size requirements, all the setback requirements, just like it's a stick-built house. And so the difference is, if you zone it to the mobile home district, that allows mobile homes on 5,000 square foot lots, so 50 by 100, either on an individual basis or 5,000 square feet per lot in a park type setup, so.
So they would be essentially spread out more than allowed in the residential zones. So they would be more conducive to what the neighborhood is in today. So I think that's favorable to have them spread out through the residential districts, just like they are now.
I
And,
feel like this is not a wealthy community to begin with. A lot of these people have lived in their homes for many, many years. They want to push people out of their homes, and I want people to be able to utilize their property to their best ability, because I think at this point, we have a lot of these mobile homes that are dilapidated, but they realize that they can't get rid of them and replace it, and they can't afford to build a home. So that's unfair to them. This is not a wealthy community. We know that through the survey. So I just feel like we be pushing people out of their homes, out of their community that they've lived in for generations.
No one's pushing-
I'm not on board with it.
No
I
one's-
would rather have the mobile homes.
No one's pushing anybody out of the community.
Well, I feel like not allowing that, like I said, there's a lot of mobile homes in this community.
And they get to stay.
Yeah, but if, like she said, one gets run down, perhaps you have the land's still yours. Are we gonna say you can't put a newer one on there because that's what you're for? Or you have to come up with some way to build a home, and maybe they can't afford it that way?
So I've only been here 2.5 years, and in the 2.5 years, we've only had one mobile home, and it was on Pine Street, that had been vacant or, to the point where it no longer is a home there. And we had one that was on, and another property that has to do with the 50% rule, was at the intersection of East, hold on a second, it's 9 and Hart Street. So there is a commercial building that's in there. Those are the only two that I'm aware of. And I would think that if someone came in here and wanted a variance or wanted the approval to be able to put their home back on here, it would come before you guys and come before council. And I would be surprised if council wouldn't approve something like that to allow someone to be able to stay in their home.
Well, yes, and that's, I want to know that for sure. I want to hear council saying that. I want to hear, we are not trying to push people out because they're lower income.
Nothing is pushing anybody out. Nothing is pushing anybody out. A mobile home that's sitting anywhere in the town of Packlet, as long as you're occupying it right now, you can be in there for the rest of your life and sell it to put somebody else, and they can be there for the rest of their life, as long as it stays habitable. As long as someone's in there, it will stay there forever.
But I think.
But this is limiting them to upgrade that and bring in a brand new in that same property.
Unless they got it rezoned, right.
Which is a hindrance.
Yeah,
That's unnecessary.
Personally, I think we do the.
What?
Allow them in the residential.
Yeah, and, because I prefer to have nice lots with a trailer than trailer park with a trailer park in one community. And that's when you get the trouble.
I feel like people aren't going to the town to have the zones, no matter where it's at. I don't think they're gonna go to the trouble to do that. I think they'll just continue to live in their rundown trailer without the option, and I don't think they'll bring it to the attention, to our attention, or,
They can do repairs all day long.
I know, but say, that's why we have the code enforcement. I mean, if they live in a rundown trailer, guess what? You can send code enforcement over there.
How does
To deal with that.
Yeah, how does that work with mobile homes and code enforcement and like making, because I would imagine that a manufactured home may be in some cases outdated to our current adopted building codes. What happens when we do something?
Well, mobile homes meet a different building code. They meet the HUD code, not the standard building code, international building code. And so they would review it based on the building code at the time that it was built. So,
So they wouldn't be subject to our
on the actual structure itself. Now, stuff on the property, that's all your property maintenance code. If they got junk in the yard, all that kind of stuff, that's different. But you review it to the standard as when it was built, so.
Okay, so like if they're replacing windows, it would be specifically to the standard of that manufactured mobile home, not to the standard.
To the HUD code, right, not to the International Building Code.
Back years ago, before we had any ordinances and all like that, there was a mobile home, a guy, dilapidated house, tore it down, and moved a mobile home in there. The only way he could get in it was to put it in diagonally. And he put it in diagonally, right in the middle of the houses and all. Do we want that?
Well, no, but it would be allowed to do that because of the setback requirements that would be needed, just like the other houses that would be built there, correct?
It would have to meet whatever the setbacks are, right.
So they couldn't do that based off of the footage and setbacks because it was so below the standards of every other home in that area. I think we allow it in the R20, but not in the R10. R10 is something, no.
And it is allowed in the residential agricultural district now. I did look that up. So like if you have a farm type situation, you can have a mobile home now, so.
So y'all's biggest concern about the mobile home is if something happens to it and it can't be replaced, or what? I mean, what?
They should be able to be replaced, mobile homes.
As long as you're there and you own that property, you should be able to update it, fix it, and use it.
Yeah. Whether it's a single-family home or a mobile home.
If someone that wants to bring a new mobile home, they would have to meet the requirements of single family home.
Yeah.
So it would be trouble.
So what I would say is that if those are changes that you want to make, when a motion is made to, if a motion is made to approve the zoning ordinance, that it be a motion that is conditional approval of the zoning ordinance with these changes, allowing that in R20 and the map changes that we already discussed, so.
Y'all need a motion.
Could we get a motion?
Another question. I know that we had to discuss it last time, but the commercial, out on the 176 that allows the residential stuff. I know we talked about we can't put the PDD on it specifically, but can we make any kind of residential that goes in there conditional based off of the conditions that you do have? So, for instance, like, we don't have 20 townhomes going on as commercial because it's allowed. We would ask them, okay, if you're going to put in a large amount of homes like that, then you would also require a playground or something along those lines.
You can't really do conditional zoning in South Carolina. You can't say, we'll give you this, but you have to do A, B, and C under standard zoning. I mean, you can negotiate under like a PDD, but I think if you're going to keep that general commercial out there, then it's just going to be subject to those guidelines. And though, the town might say, okay, you don't want this to create commercial, you want to do it as single family, let's talk about a PDD or an FRD and do it that way. And that would be more encouragement from the town to work with them to get a project approved rather than trying to force them to do a PDD. I'm not sure how you put that language in there without that being considered, sort of contractual zoning, but, because right now, it's the same thing as your other commercial districts. It allows residential according to those multifamily guidelines, so, but.
So that would, like, we can't, as the town, care with the PDD, but essentially the developer has to.
you can ask. I mean, you can say, hey, we're willing to work with you on this, we'd like you to do this, but again, that's a negotiated process where you're asking for some things, but you're giving up some things. So you might have more density of the houses might be smaller lots clustered together, but the trade-off might be there's more open space or more dedicated amenity space or something like that. So, but you're negotiating that between the town and the developer on all those pieces. And again, you can do uses, setbacks, lot sizes, density, amenity areas, landscaping, signage, all of that could be negotiated under one of those types of arrangements, so. But just to do it PDD without any rules in there, it doesn't really give you anything. You still have to go through that whole rezoning process, and then you take out any other uses that would be allowed by right now, so. Basically, they wouldn't be allowed to do anything with it until they went through the whole process, so. If you saw the PDD, I'm saying, they would have nothing that they could do with it, no permitted uses, because you're negotiating all of that language under a PDD, so.
Well, that's what I don't, like, that whole commercial zone, I'm not saying doing the whole commercial zone. I'm saying only if they decide to put in residential in that commercial zone, because the residential would be conditional. And then, of course, that's where I'm asking, because, we have the FMR that has.
Multifamily residential is what's allowed.
If we're gonna have like a major growth, like that kind of stuff like that, I just, like I said, I would like a chance to try to somehow, if it's gonna be residential, like we're negotiating, like it's, like, okay, we have all the other uses in that commercial. I'm not, saying don't do any of those uses. But that's gonna be where our bid for housing is gonna go, and most likely, because that's where it's allowed. I would need to see where we're constantly shoving townhome. If we make it a conditional use to put family there, or family home or multifamily, there's a conditional use, just that part. To give a chance to negotiate. Like I said, we're going to have that kind of development. I'd like to see where we're looking at that developer and say, hey, let's get a parking lot, let's get a green space or something instead of just a cluster of
Percentage has to be green. Can it say that?
Well, what it says in your so again, the way it's worded now is permitted use according to those multifamily requirements. And so, and the language in there, I think, so say if it's a apartment complex or townhouses, like over a third of the site has to be green space. So I think it's a 65% maximum impervious area. So that's under buildings or under parking lots. So a third of it already, if it's apartments, has to be green space of some kind. It doesn't say it specifically has to be an amenity area. It could just be lawn, essentially. And so that is just your basic guidelines right there. Now, if it's single family, they could do 5,000 square foot lots. It doesn't say anything specifically in there about having any, common green space for a subdivision, whereas you might get that if you bargained with it under a PDD or really FRD.
So if you have the future land use map, I know it's different from this one. Do you have it, Patrick, on the computer?
The future land use map?
Future land use map? With the so is West Main Street going to be also that transitional?
So the way he set it up on here is,
No Pine Street and 150, but I'm wondering if East Main Street and West Main Street will also be a part of that.
so the way he set it up, and we talked about this at the last meeting, I think you asked the same question, is the way it's currently set up now is that any properties that have already transitioned have been zoned for that transition. And if a home or if a property wants to be transitioned, then it would come to you to vote on that before it goes to that direction. But all the existing are, the ones that you're seeing out here that are orange on South Pine Street or the other side of 9 over there are ones that have already have some type of commercial
It
use.
doesn't include West Main and East Main.
Not in the future land use map. But again, in South Carolina, this is advisory. You know, in other states, it's mandatory that you follow this map. So this is just, when we were going through that process, this is what we thought was likely to happen and what we wanted to happen moving forward. It does not say you cannot, for any reason, rezone something to transitional commercial on West Main Street.
I was just wondering, because the post office is there and it's as residential. There's a church there that's as residential, thank you.
And those are allowed under those residential categories,
And there's a
so.
library.
Right, again, those are allowed under residential categories as public buildings. And again, our thought on some of those, like take churches, you take the most restrictive use you have that allows that use. So that way, if there ever want an intensification of use in that property, they have to come before you for approval, so.
Well, I was just wondering if there was two areas that come in, because I know a lot of people come in West Main Street.
And that, on West Main Street, if you look on, this is the future land use map is what you're looking at right now, is what was approved under the comp plan. And it looks like West Main Street and East Main Street were not part of those transition, it was just the Pine Street.
Pine Street and 150, so, were the corridors that we set up for that.
I'm wondering if we should change that, at least from
Well, that's,
Memorial to McDowell and make that transitional. Because, I mean, it just makes it easier down the road, having that center area that's commercial. If it does start to grow and does start to
Yep.
expand, it can expand out that way between the library and the post office.
that would be a different process because that is in the comp plan, which has already been adopted by the town, so that would be, that, the future land use map is, right, so, which is not to say that you couldn't, change that, and you're supposed to review it in 5 years anyway, so that would give you time to see what's happened in that intervening period, and maybe you make that adjustment at that time, to update that, but again, that's already been adopted as part of the comp plan, so. Excuse me.
But as things start to transition, then you can do that zoning to change that on there.
At least that little area, what it does.
But like South Pine Street currently is primarily residential. And so it gives the opportunity that if someone who lives out on South Pine Street to be able to come and speak about it or know about what's happening before it's transitioned over to something else.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions?
I have one.
Okay.
It's about mobile homes. I just want to be clear on what we decided, that we can let them in the
So what has,
family.
yeah, what has been suggested so far is that the map change for Satellite Depot and for the corner of the property, the gas station, TC gas station by Turner Street, to change that on the map. And then the way I've taken it so far is to allow mobile and manufactured homes in the R20 only, not in the R10, so.
And not commercial.
Right, so it,
In the commercial, I think just the R20 area.
so right now, if you make that change, that would allow them in a to-be designated mobile home park district, the R20, and then the RA, the residential agricultural,
The
so.
mobile home
But
districts,
you have to,
like trailer parks. and
right,
stuff.
you would have to zone something now for somebody to do that. They would have to come before you,
That's what any of us want.
Right.
We don't want trailer parks all over Packard.
right.
We just want people to have the ability to not have to come before council or us and just be able to make the changes that they want to make to the property.
Right. So those are the changes that I have written down, so.
Could someone, if they've got 5 or 6 acres, could they put multiple mobile homes on that property?
If it is a single property with a single property of 5 acres that's zoned R20, they could do one mobile home, unless they subdivide it into lots, but that would be a subdivision that would have to come before the town and all of that, so.
Because I don't think, I mean,
And then, again, if they're gonna do mobile homes in that example, then they'd have to get it rezoned to mobile home park at that point.
Yeah, we just,
depending on how they want to do individual lots versus, sort of a big park with no individual lots.
we just want to be clear that that's not what we don't want
Yep.
trailer parks all over. So if somebody has 5 acres and they want to put a trailer, fine, put a trailer.
Right.
And so I make a motion to approve that.
That's
I
that.
need to.
Do we need to go ahead and just cancel out the residential manufactured housing zoning? That's essentially what that was for, right? It was allowed in an area like that.
I mean, I think it's useful to have it in there as a tool, because you may have I've seen really bad mobile home parks, I've seen really nice mobile home parks, and so you may have somebody, my in-laws lived in a mobile home park in Florida, and it was beautiful. But that's,
Did we say that each one had to be on 5,000?
right, somebody would have to come in to you, present their plans, and if you agreed with their plans, you recommend approval, and council would vote for it. If it's just somebody comes in and says, I want to put, 30 single wides on this with no amenities, you might say no to that, but the town has that control,
Well,
so,
as long as they do.
yes.
If a home has been burnt down, can you replace it with a mobile home?
So if you allow mobile homes in R20, you could do it you could put a mobile home on any R20 lot, so.
Have a motion.
I think,
So Rome wasn't built in a day, so can I get a vote? Can I get a motion to approve this zoning ordinance conditionally?
Motion.
Second? Can I get a second?
Second.
Third vote? All those in favor?
All those in favor?
Motion has been,
So that will go April 3rd, is that right?
April 3rd.
April 3rd to council for first reading, so.
I have one question. Why did the council approve this before we even met? Did
They
not
didn't.
realize What exactly did they do?
Are you talking about the pending ordinance doctrine?
Yeah, I'm talking about,
Hey, because it wasn't so the pending ordinance doctrine states that if someone wants to build something on a lot and it doesn't conform to this, they can't do that. They have to wait until this is done, or they have to do whatever this currently says. They can't use the old thing going forward.
So where you know that you're about to adopt a new ordinance, basically you restrict people until the new ordinance is in place. So like almost a moratorium on development until the new ordinance is in place. So they haven't approved this yet, but they said, this is coming, so we want you to wait until this is done.
Otherwise, what may end up happening is developers come in and they see, oh, I see the direction they're going. I can still take advantage of the former zoning ordinance, and I can go in and I can put all kind of stuff in there, and if I start that project before they finish the zoning, I can go ahead and put something in based off of this.
but since this was voted the other night.
Because the pending ordinance doctrine was voted on and approved by council, it states that if somebody wanted to come in, they can't use this ordinance anymore.
so it's clear that it wasn't voted on at the
It
council.
was not voted on in council. The pending ordinance doctrine was completely different. And one thing that was brought up at that meeting is, yes, there is a possibility that y'all could change something, or that council changes something, and so you have a situation where they're doing it based off of, at that time, that zoning ordinance, and then it potentially could change, but it is, once they start that project, they can finish, they could finish it, but it had to meet to whatever the zoning ordinance,
So now it pretty much stopped work until,
unless they want to do something that meets what y'all have approved here.
The
Can I get a motion to
Well,
adjourn?
I have a question, but what trajectory would we do forward as far as the planning commission? You know, after finishing our zoning and things, what do we anticipate still meeting monthly? Are we going to be meeting on an as-needed basis? What does council talk about any ways that they want to utilize us for any projects?
It's completely up, if y'all want to meet every month, just to meet, just to hang out and talk to each other, that's up to you. But what I would prefer, what I would suggest to you is that I'll reach out to the chair if something comes up that needs planning commission review or approval or whatever. And then at that point, we would schedule something, and based on it would only be scheduled on a typical date. So I think it's right now it's the Monday after a council meeting.
So we might have less meetings and things. Also, as far as a lot of the steps that we include in the ordinance, I think it's going to trigger some things. Is there any discussion in council things as far as the code for animals on that chapter? I think it is, that's going to be conflicting in some areas with the zoning ordinance, are there things like that that we need to be looking at? Also,
So if there's anything in the zoning ordinance or anything in the map that y'all would like to tackle after once everything's done, what I would think, and this is just my thought on this, is despite your work on this over the last year, there's a good chance that this thing is not perfect. And there's an opportunity, there's going to be a situation where someone brings something up that they want to do, and they're like, oh, I didn't realize that was, I really want to do that, and y'all will say, oh, I didn't realize that's what I was voting on, and it gives you the opportunity to change that. And if you look at the former one that was done, originally it was passed back in 2007, it was amended 3 times in 2011, once in 2013, and then again in 2014.
Yeah, you will have changes at some point. Everybody does.
What typically happens is there'll be a lot of BZA requests for variances, and after a certain number of variances kind of come up, it'll be, you know what, we just need to go ahead and change that. So they're not having to go before the BZA for a variance. And then at that point, bring it up to you guys. If you want to go ahead and do that, you can.
What about discrepancies, I guess with the animals, what I'm asking is, some of this, if we do end up adding residential agriculture, the municipal code itself does not allow those. So how does that work? What trumps, the municipal code or the zoning ordinance?
So with the municipal code that's out there, would be up to council to change that, or if you want to request your council member to change that. So right now, I think it only has, the most you can have is hens. You can't have any roosters, you can't have any donkeys or pigs or whatever, that sort of things that are out there. If you wanted to have that changed, you would ask council to have that changed. You'd come to a public hearing and discuss that on there, and then at that point, they would direct us to make changes or ask me to make changes, and I'll bring it up to the next council meeting with that change.
But the municipal code would trump the zoning ordinance then?
Yes, because I don't think in the zoning ordinance, it specifically says you can have horses in there. It just says this would be the area to have horses if it's allowed. Is that?
No, I don't think it does. I think it says you can't have any kind of farm in our current, not the zoning ordinance, the municipal code says you can't have any kind of farm animal. So now we have districts that allow it, but our municipal code itself doesn't allow it. So it's like they're conflicting with each other.
Yeah, if that's what your town code says now, that could be a conflict. And that probably is something you would need to look to make an amendment to.
That's what
So-
I'm saying, when we send this to council, can we recommend that we just ask and look at some things like that, discrepancies that might be, so that we make sure that it is one answer instead of having multiple answers and having.
Right, because one thing we've already identified as a potential problem was the language regarding chickens, because when I tried to look it up in the code, it said, look at this section, and that section didn't exist. So, now, that could be me, it's just not, it wasn't updated on Municode, and you could have something on the books here that addresses it, but it just wasn't online, because sometimes it takes a long time to get those updated on that Municode website, so, but that was one thing we identified when we were looking through the things to see what language you did have, and I'm sure you have language, but I don't know what it is, because it wasn't on there, so, I'm sure Patrick can track that down now.
So when since this is already on its way to council will review it, and they will do any tweaks or whatever that needs to be done.
To the
right?
town code at the same time. Well, yeah, they can do that, yes.
Yes. So our work is done with that part for right this minute, right?
Right.
Okay.
Under permitted uses 39.2, it discusses the uses as it relates to the buildings and the structures, but not the animals itself.
But I'm in code, it's 4, chapter 4, regulation.
She's talking about the town code.
Right, but you were saying it conflicts, where under permitted uses, it says including pens, structures for the raising of farm animals, but not the animals themselves. This is just for the structures for them being out there.
Right, and so you would have to, like, because it also says like riding stables. So there's an assumption that, we're saying this is allowed use, there's an assumption that the town allows farm animals some fashion. So it could be as simple as a change into your code as saying no farm animals are allowed except in the RA residential agricultural district.
Yeah, that's what
So,
I'm saying. I think
okay.
we really need that. I think council needs to be aware that we've added stuff that doesn't align with
Yeah.
what they already have existing.
Right. And the good thing is you have two council members that have been part of this process, so they've seen some of this, so.
I have one more quick thing. I mentioned at the beginning about the industrial, that I'd rather not have manufacturing and production. I don't know, we never went any further with that. Does anyone agree with me about the manufacturing?
Wait.
Out of 176,
176.
industrial,
She's talking about on
manufacturing, production, I mean, I'm okay with storage, warehouses, distribution, things like that, but I'm just not on board for having manufacturing or production. I wouldn't want to be on Debbie coming over here and putting in a, you know what I mean? I am not on board for that.
Right. I think that's,
Potential EPA issues.
right. I mean, on
What are the potential,
176,
because they would still have to follow the EPA.
Well, I mean, they would, but do they always? Things happen.
right. I
I
don't,
would rather those things not happen in my community.
I'm not sure those parcels are large enough for something like that to happen there. I think you're more, being on the highway, I think there might be some demand for the warehousing, distribution type facility there.
I'm okay with
But,
it. My only issue is the manufacturing and the production.
Right.
Does anyone agree with me? Are we going to vote on this to change it, or are we just going to leave it how it is? I make a motion to change it to, I'm even okay with it all being commercial and allow just anything there, multifamily. I don't even care what's there. I just don't want manufacturing or production.
And just because I understand, why is that?
I already stated why. I mean, I don't want
I mean, the survey,
it happening in the community that I live in, and if we can avoid that happening, I'd like to avoid that happening.
the survey, I believe, said that the community wanted jobs. Is that correct? I remember that being in there.
Jobs, but if there's a warehouse or a distribution center, or there's a lot of things that can go there, it doesn't have to be manufacturing or production.
Is there something that's going there already? Have there been plans for something to go there?
There's no plans for anything to go there.
Can you maybe give us an example? Like, I know we've done light versus heavy industry, but how specifically pollution-based can like manufacturing and production be? Like, can you give an example of something that would qualify? Because, I mean, we could just essentially take that part out of the permitted uses. Because a lot of the other stuff is not going to give off. I know we have like language in there that says not noxious odors and stuff like that that are measurable. So what would like production or manufacturing specifically, like what is an example of that? Do you have something like that?
so So light assembly, heavy industrial is like the quarries. There's blasting, there's noise, there's digging, things like that. A BMW with a large scale manufacturing like that would probably fit under the heavier manufacturing. I have a whole list that I didn't bring with me, but of examples. So something that's just assembling small, I'm trying to think of a good example.
Like the battery plant that went into the rest of that.
I think that would be heavy industrial because you have a lot of chemicals, a lot of environmental concerns with a place like that. That's more heavy industrial. Maybe like a Milo's Tea or something like that might be more light industrial because that's food products, beverages, packaging, things like that. It's a lesser scale perhaps.
Like a Nestle or like just a first plant.
Maybe something like that might be, again, I've got a whole bunch of examples I can send out to you, that I had put together when we talked about this earlier, that I don't have with me tonight, that give you a better sense of what that would look like, so.
Because I agree with you, Renee, I don't want to say anything that just is going to contribute to it.
I mean, I'm okay with the mining, the quarry, the natural resources. That I'm okay with. It doesn't potentially pose a problem for the town. Although, I mean, it does impair structures.
Yeah, it just destroys your foundation.
But
Yeah.
that's a natural resource.
But I mean, that's, that's noise, that's vibrations, that's dust on your house maybe, I don't know how close, right. But those are all the impacts in the heavy industrial talks about, so.
That's, like I said,
We don't want any more of that.
Yeah, and so, and that's not allowed on 176. So if you have any industrial go out there, those are not huge sites, so you're not going to get a really super big thing out there anyway, just because, 40, 50 acres out there. I mean, something like that on the industrial pieces.
Part of that it's light industrial,
That
no chemical use or something.
It currently already is light industrial.
It's light industrial now, and so what that says is, so agricultural farm, automotive service station or repair, bulk products facility, so think like, you get like a bunch of rock and bricks and that kind of stuff out there for sale.
So the manufacturing and production was in the heavy.
It allows light manufacturing or production facility.
It would be like you said, Milo's plant or.
But then under prohibited uses, that's where you get into none of the offensive or obnoxious operation, and it talks about dust, fumes, odor, smoke, vibration, so all the things with the quarry there, and then no manufacture of a bunch of these other products which would cause a problem. Oil or petroleum products, explosive things like gas, acid, ammonia, none of that's allowed there. So, and then, honestly, with EPA standards the way they are now, I wouldn't anticipate a problem there. Nothing is perfect, but,
Happens, and like I said,
Yeah.
I don't want an accident happening in the
Right.
community that I live in.
what I picture going there is some sort of, it could be residential and get rezoned. It could be, warehouses or, storage building or,
Keep saying about that.
what's the guy?
I don't want.
What's the guy do has like the, not wholesaling, but like distribution type facility, something like that maybe, because you're right on, 4-lane highway. I would envision something more like that going there than something actual manufacturing, but you don't know. You can't know for sure, so.
Manufacturing and production. So, that area, whatever that is. So, I make a motion to change it to the commercial.
So if you do commercial, that does not allow the warehousing, it does not allow the distribution type stuff and all that,
To change
so.
it. So that there's no, that we remove that wording then, manufacturing and production, no light, none, just remove that wording.
3-45, we could just take out like manufacturing and production facility under uses permitted. We could just plug that one out. I think another question I have about that area too, is that something I like about the commercial that I don't see in industrial is sports facilities. Is that plan, Apple, industrial, is that comparable to something that would be put into a large sports facility?
I mean, that would be allowed in the general commercial, is not permitted currently in the light industrial, so. And again, you always have the option to rezone it if something like that were to appear as a potential project, so.
Oh, it does have, it says community recreation or sports facility there, so that would.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, there you go. There.
Okay, so we're starting over.
I make a motion to change the wording for light industrial and remove manufacturing and production facilities.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Question?
Remain light industrial, but remove manufacturing and reproduction. So it still allows for distribution centers, warehouses, things like that.
Just curious, would like a cotton manufacturing place, like Packlet Manufacturing, be allowed in that location?
I mean, it depends on exactly what they're doing. That might be more heavy industrial. If, you know, I think more kind of old school mill with lots of noise and, you know, heavy equipment, you know, kind of thing, but,
It just looked like the mill that originally built the town would not be allowed back into the town.
you'd have to zone it probably heavy industrial, so, to do like a mill like that.
I think if the mill was going to survive, it would still be here. So it would south.
The mill left for cheaper labor to go overseas, according to NAFTA.
Right, that's what I'm saying. It makes it, I don't think we're going to.
Oh, yes, it made it. The mill made it here. It made it a long time
If
here.
it's, but what I'm saying is if that's the case, it would still be here.
It was just time for it to leave because
Right.
the times changed.
Right. and
Yeah.
I don't foresee it coming back. That's what I'm saying. I don't foresee that.
You wouldn't want anything like that to come back, is what you're saying?
I'm not saying I wouldn't like to. I just don't think it's probably going to. Like, I don't, you know, you're going to put a heavy industry down in the middle of all this. I don't think.
You're saying you'd like to have something like that come back?
No, I'm saying, I think that if something like that were going to survive, it would still been here. I think that, I don't think that's.
Well, they didn't survive anywhere, and because of the cotton and all that stuff, but it was people's survival here. So we're not gonna talk about the mill.
But it was until it wasn't.
Yeah, it was.
That's right. It was everything, that's right.
She doesn't foresee it coming back.
Of course it's not coming back.
That industry for this town.
Well, not that industry, maybe some other industry, I mean. Yeah.
So there's a motion and a second. Do we need a vote?
Vote. All those in favor?
All opposed?
Opposes? Aye, opposed. 2. Because a lot of times we say no to stuff when we really need it. So. A way to do it. Yeah, a process to do it.
Case by case.
Any more comments? Anything else? Can I get a motion to, do you have anything else?
She won't hit this thing.
Can I get a motion to adjourn? Meeting adjourned.
Appreciate y'all, gentlemen. Some of the work's done anyway.
What's that?
Got a good 2 years.
Yeah, I'll let him know, but if you may want to, what page is it on? There's a section on here where you put Anderson County in there.
And your definitions.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I didn't really look at those too closely.
Your eyes have probably been blurring together from the Like, you have to read this over and over again, your brain goes,
Mush.
stop.